I must get to the Prime Minister yesterday, who took the X-axis out to March of 2021. Are our societies prepared for the economic damage of a pandemic out another 6 months?
Well, what we have to ask ourselves is also what we're learning crisis to crisis. Did we learn the lessons from the financial crisis? I'd say no. Are we learning the lessons from the current health pandemic? I'm not sure. Lots of public money globally has gone in for the recovery, and we're failing to actually structure those recovery funds in ways that actually really build stronger systems on the ground. And I, mainly mean health systems. It's not enough to be clapping healthcare workers. It's very interesting to go country by country and see, have we actually better resourced our healthcare workers, the healthcare system actually innovated within it, but also made sure that the recovery funds are, for example, conditional on both strengthening those systems, but also the underlying business model.
Mariana, look, the fabric of your book is on the back end. You talk about the economics of hope. Right now, the politicians are hoping. How do we do the hope of economics while providing income support? I don't see that in America, and it's even under question in Europe as well, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I don't just talk about hope. I talk about the need to rethink value. And, again, health is the perfect area, because when you have a public health system where we only know how to value the input, so the costs, that's why we often talk about, the costs of healthcare. We don't see it as an investment for the future. And, this need to actually revalue what matters to make our economies more healthy, more resilient, to build what I think we should be calling a smart, healthy Green Deal. It's not even enough to talk about a Green Deal. It has to be a healthy Green Deal. That will make our economies more hopeful. But, hope on its own without actually changing the structures on the ground. So the business model, the corporate governance models, the structure of finance, but also government itself, which is just too much in the business of handouts, subsidies, guarantees, and kind of too little, too late. Is fixing one market failure to another. We actually have to be building, creating, co-creating. This isn't just about the state, co-creating with the private sector, shaping markets to be more inclusive, more sustainable, and definitely to be stronger so that when we actually get these crises, and there will be another one for sure, there'll be another wave, we can actually react in ways that are not too reactive.
Mariana, let me go to your piece in Project Syndicate, where you basically argue that the world may need to resort to lockdowns this time to tackle climate change. Now, you're right. We need to move quickly if we want to transform the future of work, transit, and energy use, and make the concept of a green good life a reality for generations to come. Now, one way or the other, radical change is inevitable. You say our task is to ensure that we achieve the change we want while we still have the choice. Mariana, I mean, what has actually held us back so far? It seems that, you talk about public-private partnerships, but do we have the right people in government to actually, make the bold decisions that you argue are needed?
So, I mean, it's easy to, just look at governments or even just to blame the private sector. What I do in the article and what I've been doing in my work now for some years is to pinpoint the actual changes we need amongst all the different economic actors. In fact, in the book, again, that we were just talking about, I talk about values being collectively created. Well, let's look at how it's being created. Let's look at the different actors. So finance continues to mainly finance itself. In the UK, where I'm sitting, something like 80% of funds go back to the financial sector and finance, insurance, and real estate. So in that sense, we're overly financialized in terms of how we have structured finance. Our business models, we can talk about stakeholder value all we want, but unfortunately, many companies continue to be very short-termist and focus mainly on rewarding shareholders. Share buybacks continue to escalate at the expense of more longer-run investments, including in human capital. We can talk about the robots are taking away jobs, but if we're not investing in the skills and people in those long-run investments to actually govern these transitions better, we're in trouble. And, the figures are quite stark with the climate. So last year, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change argued that we just have 10 years left, and yet in 2019, 10 years left until climate breakdown basically is irreversible. But in 2019, so just last year, subsidies to fossil fuel companies were estimated at something like $20 billion a year in the US and $55 billion a year in the European Union. And the COVID recovery funds allocated to energy companies by the G20 governments, something like 56% has been handed to fossil fuel projects, equivalent to $152 billion. So, even just those numbers, and sorry if I just ranted them out, doesn't make me think we're actually moving. So what we actually need is a new social compact.